Well, welcome everybody. I love that I think I know almost everyone that is here, which is pretty awesome to have that level of a connection with each and every one of you here today. We're going to create some new connections. We're going to practice empathy. And as the webinar that you signed up for through Roaring Fork Leadership, so thank you again for joining us. Today it's called Empathy, a Lost Skill. I am Andrea Palm-Porter, the Executive Director of Roaring Fork Leadership. And I'm also trained in emotional intelligence, certified master practitioner. I do a lot of trainings and coaching, also a transformational coach. I, as I mentioned, executive director of a leadership program right here in the Roaring Fork Valley. And I know Alex is joining us from the East Coast. He's our probably furthest virtual traveler. So cool. And I was actually on an earlier webinar with him, showing me he does Salesforce consulting. So he was doing a webinar on some, how to implement Salesforce more effectively. So it's awesome. So and again, our topic is on empathy. I think in the leadership world today, there's a great article that McKinsey Company put out in early May, around midway, about the leadership in crisis. And one of the main topics, they talked about like 4 or 5 different aspects of what is needed today in leadership, and empathy was on the top of that list. So, and it is so true with what we're dealing with in this pandemic. Even in our real lives, I bet our emotions are being felt a little bit more on our sleeve, and some of those like ones that are more related to worry and anxiety and overwhelmingness, and what the world today, in order to work with that, support people, being vulnerable, right, is to allow people to express it, and then being receptive using your empathy. So that's what we're going to get into today. So I'm going to go ahead and get my screen share going so you can follow along with me. And let's see, I'd love, you guys all, I have Grand Central Station here with my screens. I have 3 screens and y'all moved to a different one. So I'm going to bring you back. Okay. So can you all see my screen? Can I see a thumbs up if I can? Yep. Great. So I've been doing, again, EQ work for, I don't know, past half a dozen, if not more years, and have really, and even the assessments I do. So I do probably at least 100 EQ assessments and coaching each year. And what I am also noticing in results of individuals is that empathy scores are lower than what they have been, let's say my first 3-4 years of doing it compared to the last 3 or 4 years of watching this. So it's really interesting to see statistics on my end of the individuals I work with. So this comes from the McKinsey article, is the little quote in here that 4 qualities of awareness, vulnerability, empathy, and compassion are critical for business leaders to care for people in crisis and set the stage for business recovery. I think about how do we actually like move, right, as we go through recovery. I mean, recovery is such a big word, even in, you think of it just in its like general context. We recover constantly in lives. We're dealing with change constantly. So we're kind of riding the wave. If you've all heard of the term, we're riding the Corona coaster right now. It's my favorite word. I've been, and it's so true. I can see myself going up and down within a day. I can see it happening within an hour, within a week. It's interesting just to be very observant of our patterns, watching us work through this pandemic. And of course, these skills that we can learn are also helpful in any aspects of our lives, not just today. I guarantee you before a pandemic, empathy was needed in your world. So I just wanted to do a quick distinction so that we have some context of what empathy is and sympathy. Sometimes I see that they get overlapped. So empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. And I want to emphasize the word share. Doesn't mean you have to take on somebody else's feelings. Like their feelings are their feelings. It's just to share in it. Be there with them. That's all it means. If they're upset, it doesn't mean you have to be upset. You can just be there with them. Create a connection with them. And then sympathy is feeling of pity and sorrow for someone else's misfortune. So two very distinctly different ways. And I think, again, they get overlapped sometime in our languaging of how we use empathy and sympathy. So Brene Brown, I don't know, it's a really quick, short video. I'm gonna hit it. When I hit play, I would love to make sure that you guys can hear the sound. So if you can give me a thumbs up that you're hearing the sound. But this is less than 3 minutes, and I think Brene Brown sums up the difference between sympathy and empathy really well. So I'll go ahead and get that started. Can you hear audio?
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. And we do it all the time, because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
So, oh, there we go. So, what's interesting, you know, I found myself over the years, and I'm sure we all have stories of how we relate to empathy. And I recently had an uncle pass away, and I had to check in with myself to be vulnerable and make the phone call to my aunt, right? Just to say, I'm so sorry. I'm here for you. This must be hard to work through. I mean, I know her, you know, my cousins just left over this weekend, and now I think she's home alone, you know, in this new kind of way to experience life without her husband. And it takes, like, to even when I hear there's a funeral, it's one of those things like, I kind of instantly have that feeling of like, oh, I have to go be, if I go, that vulnerability needs to show up. And I get really nervous of how that's going to show up. So I know even trained in emotional intelligence and empathy, sometimes it's hard. It's hard to conjure up how to be empathetic in those type of situations. Now that might be an extreme, but let's think about this. In the world today, I have a poll I'm going to pull up here. And the question that I want you to answer is, do you think empathy is declining in our world? Like, how do you, when you think of empathy out there, like, do you see more of it, less of it? Are you demonstrating more of it, less of it? And maybe there's a maybe in there. I think sometimes there's like different circumstances that show up. So if you can see on your computer screen, I just launched the poll. Perfect. And I'll wait to see if you see what your response will be here. I'm getting a, well, we're kind of tied with yes and maybe. I'm looking for, yeah, we're tied. So I'm gonna go, yep, we are. Scores are in. So do you think empathy is declining? And let me share the results with you all. If you can see the results, most people, right, 5, we have a total of 9 people on our webinar today. 5 people think yes, it's declining, and there are a few maybes, right? We got 4 maybes. I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing this. For somebody who said maybe, would they be willing to, if they're not unmuted, share why they said maybe?
Hey, Andrea, it's Kelly. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Kelly?
Good. I'm wondering if it's something to do with being exhausted from the pandemic. So empathy fatigue, if there is such a thing. That's where I was coming from.
Yeah, I think I find that I don't know if we're edgy. We're more edgy, right? If it's like you wake up and you read the news, or other people are more edgy around you, or there's a lot more emotions, right? So it's like you don't even like know how to deal with it or respond, or you're edgy too.
Sure.
Yep.
So how do you deal with that? Knowing that you want to be empathetic, but maybe you're exhausted yourself.
Yep. Well, I think an empathetic response would be I'm exhausted, is just to put it out there, be vulnerable. I'm exhausted too. I'm not sure I'm in a great place to support you in this exact moment, but I care for you a lot and I would like to support you. Could we have this is this something more of an emergency that I can rally up and create myself to be available for you? Or is this something that we could have a discussion, even if I can have 30 minutes or tomorrow, something like that?
Thank you.
Yeah, because it's tough, right? It weighs on us also. And if we're expected to play that role of being the empathizer sometimes, and we're not available to do that, we have to like at least be honest with the person. And maybe they might have another resource they can go to, or suggest that to them too, Kelly. That would be another thought. Yep. Michelle, did you vote maybe?
Yeah, I did. I think there's a misunderstanding of what it is, what empathy really is about. And I think part of the issue is that we've had some leadership sort of steer us over to here and then kind of over there. And so the more that we're in this kind of zone like that, it makes it really difficult for people to get grounded, stay grounded, live in your ownership, and then that opens up the door to better understand empathy.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's like people's, like, and that's why I put that distinction just between empathy and sympathy. And I do think in different environments, it shows up very differently.
Right.
In different personality styles or different cultures, right? Nurture it or they don't nurture it.
That's right.
Yep. Yeah. So I can definitely see a maybe in there. Yep. Good point. Nancy, did you have something? You're on mute. You're on mute.
I did it. Got it. I said no because I just see so many people who need empathy today. who are in fear and don't know what it looks like in the future, and all of that kind of stuff, that I think that people are just overwhelmed with empathy, you know, like being empathetic, like their empathy gland is drained out kind of thing.
Yeah. Yep. So it's interesting in the research I've been finding, I was looking for recent research because I've seen some, you know, in books I've read about empathy and the decline, and in different age brackets as well, in youth and college students and in the workforce. So I'm going to share a few slides giving you some of the research that I am finding. And I even did I tested myself with the Google bias, right? So let's say my bias currently, as I put this talk together, is seeing more research that says empathy is declining. So I put into Google the increase in empathy. I like checked my theory, right? Like, is empathy increasing? I did a few different searches in Google and I couldn't find anything that validated any aspect of empathy increasing. All I could find was that statistics sharing of the decline of empathy in our world. So really interesting. I was trying to prove myself wrong in this theory and what I have been finding. So here was a study done by Michigan State University where they went across by country. United States ranked 7th, which isn't awful, but at the same time, you got to wonder, why are other people higher? Right? What are other countries doing that cause them to be more empathetic? You can see the list right here. Ecuador was the most empathetic country. Saudi Arabia, Peru, Denmark, United Arab, Korea, and then United States. The least empathetic country, very interesting, was Lithuania. Now the study I didn't get too deep in it to understand all the reasons why, either more empathetic states or less empathetic states. But what was interesting is that they did note the Americas have been changing in recent decades, that leading to a larger focus on individuals and less on others. So our brain is wired from a neuroscience perspective to be selfish. Right? If we are about, as a human race, surviving, we do have a selfish aspect to ourselves to survive. So it's like, think about going on an airplane when they say, you know, put the gas mask, the air mask on yourself first before you share it with anybody else, right? There's aspects of we need to take care of ourselves versus others. But what we, and think about on using internet, more Zoom connections today because of the pandemic. So how is empathy showing up? How do you show empathy on a Zoom call? It takes more energy, I'll tell you that. It is proven that if you can see each other's, of course, much better. Face masks, if you're covering your face and you lose facial features, it's going to be harder to read each other if empathy is showing up. So there's a lot of things that we have to put into consideration of how we are reading each other. And we actually, I believe, need to be using our words, the linguistic ability that we have to support that connection with others. Because you heard Brene Brown, it's creating a connection with others. Some more statistics. This was an article written in the Washington Post, June of 2019. A reporter was interviewing Janil Zaki. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correct, but the research was done on college students where they found them scoring less empathetic than students 20 years prior to them. So again, a lot of research that we do need to build more empathy skills. I know what I'm also finding in public schools is that there's minimal social and emotional curriculums in there. There are some, but private schools are stronger in the social and emotional learning curriculum built in and how they train their teachers and staff to support the emotional and social skills of our kids. So Roaring Fork Leadership did step in, and we created a public school program based on emotional and social skills, over the last handful of years, but we've now put that on hold in the next school year. So hopefully that'll be back to continue to build those efforts of social and emotional learning for our kids, because add empathy to the piece of it, it is something we learn our entire lifetime. I mean, I'm turning 50 this year and I still struggle with sometimes showing vulnerability, especially around death, which is interesting. So I have to, like, I conjure up my awareness of like, what's my fear? Why am I dealing with this? It's like that flood of emotions, like Kelly was talking about, even in the workplace, right? Dealing with the change and just the overwhelmingness perspective that's going on, right? It's kind of the same, similar-ish. We're all experiencing a flood of emotions is what's going on. And we just have to get better at being able to regulate our emotions and have access to doing something about them. So another aspect in the workforce, 72% of business leaders are stating the need for more empathy in their organizations. So Michelle, kind of to your point, in different cultures and businesses, you know, where you do see it or you don't see it, statistically, business leaders are even saying, we need more of it here. Not sure how to do it. Where do I start? How do I build this type of culture? Yeah, Michelle.
You know, the other thing I want to say is that the world of empathy is not a mind-oriented experience. It's a heart-oriented experience. Certainly the mind is useful and required for us to verbally communicate things around empathy, but our expression, as you talked about, nonverbal communication. But at the end of the day, if they're not feeling something and not willing to at least put your toe in the water to express that empathy, then that statistic's is gonna keep going up.
I know, right? We need
Unfortunately.
Yep. We need to fix that, right? So that's why we're all here today, is to put, maybe for ourselves, even do a little bit of discovery. I have some breakout rooms and some quick questions to do some inquiry into this, and think of it that you get to support each other, right? You get to kind of inquire with each other and support each other and build a connection. So you're going to be able to practice empathy today and potentially see how you view it. As I mentioned, I still do a lot of reflection around it so that I can continue to do better with it over time. We're human. It's our journey. We all experience it, again, differently. So Brene Brown talked about 4 attributes. I just wanted to do a quick reminder. So empathy would be to do behaviors. Think of, as just before we got started, I asked a question of a few of us that were on the call. It's like, what behaviors do you demonstrate that would show you're being empathetic to somebody else? Like, how would somebody else recognize in you you're being empathetic towards them? What behaviors do you do? So to be able to, so these would be some, this slide gives you access to some of that, right? To be able to see the world as others see it. So when you're with someone else and you think empathy is called for, how do you know you're seeing it as they see it versus seeing it from how you see it? Because we all have biases. We all have our filters. We all show up with our knowing brain. Our brain already knows so much stuff. And I think when you're getting into those places of empathy, and Kelly, even in like the workplace, it's like, and I've worked with SGM, I've shared with them a trick I use. It's like, start by listening from a place of nothing. Like, wipe your brain clean, like there's nothing there, and start listening there. And if a new thought tries to come in, or you try to solve the problem for the other person, stop. Become aware and just listen from nothing. The other thing is to be non-judgmental. If you're listening from nothing, there would be no judgment. But again, our brains are trained into knowing what we know, create the biases and the judgment. So that would be another axis to think about. If you hear yourself come up with judgment, stop the judgment. To understand another person's feelings. So how do you actually, like, again, how do you, like, if somebody's sad, do you have an experience of sadness? Now you're not taking on their sadness, you're just having an experience of sadness. Because you're connected to them. There's mirror neurons. If anybody's done some neuroscience studying, mirror neurons will actually connect. Like a baby smiles at you, that's their mirror neurons connecting because you're smiling at the baby. Mirror neurons can do the same thing with any emotion. You know, laughter is contagious. I'm sure you've all heard that. Same thing with sadness, anger. You know, like when conflict happens and there's anger in the room, I have 4 kids. I guarantee I've had a lot of practice at this. I've found myself taking on that level of anger, and I have to check in myself like, whoa, you know, their voice goes up, my voice goes up. I'm like, nope, self-awareness, bring my voice down. And that's to just like, oh, they're upset. I'm not upset. They're upset. I just have to hold space for it. So then to be able to communicate the understanding of that person's feelings. And I'll just say, it looks like you're upset. Tell me more of what's going on with you. Tell me more. That must be a tough place to be in. Is that true? You know, those are the types of empathetic responses that would demonstrate, right, empathetic behavior. So that was my question. How does empathy show up for you? So again, listening from a place of nothing is another trick in identifying and acknowledge what emotions they are feeling. That's kind of 2 simple things, I think, just to at least get into the groove of being more empathetic. So I have 3 challenges for you today. 1, how can you make a positive impact in someone's life using empathy? How can you make a difference in someone's life using empathy? And how can you contribute to the world using more empathy? This is going to be my challenge, and we're going to put this into some practice. I hope, please, this is like with respect with each other, right? You're going to have individual confidential conversations. Create a connection. This is an opportunity. I know Paula, I don't think I know very well, but everyone else on this call, I have a personal connection with, which I'm like excited to be able to say that. And I hope that you all can create a connection within yourselves, right? That's like what networking and community is all about. When you have community and you feel support, it's easier to be vulnerable and it's easier to connect with each other. And I guarantee you empathy is going to become more natural for you if you create those networks of connection for yourself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create breakout rooms, and I'm going to have you just do a pair share. And I want you to share with each other, how do you make a connection with someone else? How do you actually do that? So your conversation, hopefully you're going to make a connection with someone else, but at the same time, I want you to talk about it. How do you actually make a connection with someone? What behaviors do you do, and are they tied to empathy? So that's going to be your conversation. We're going to do this for a total of 4 minutes. So you each get 2 minutes kind of approximately to share. You can create dialogue, and maybe one has a little bit more to share than the other, and it's juicy stuff by all means. So a total of 4 minutes you can all manage, and this is going to be your first question. And when you come back, if anybody's willing to share, great opportunity for us to all learn from each other. So I'm going to go ahead.
Andrea?
Yes, Michelle.
Hi, sorry for interrupting. I'm having a technical issue, so I'm going to have to log off and come back on.
Okay, sounds good.
I'll be right back.
Okay. So I'm going to automatically set up these break rooms, and then we're going to make sure they're set up for 4 minutes. There might be 3 of you in a room. There's one group with 3 in here. So, but then, yep, that's how it's gonna work. Okay, here you go.
Fine. Oh,
Now we're coming back.
The abrupt welcome back. Yeah.
Well, I was listening intently to Sammy, and she was into some juicy stuff. So.
Oh, good, good. Meg, good to see your face. Yay, I love when the videos are on. Again, just another connection. Just truly, if you think of that, like if you can see somebody, it's a whole different experience than, especially on these Zoom calls, than if you just hear audio. I mean, they both work, don't get me wrong. There's no judgment here today. Just really interesting to see how you actually experience, right? How you show up when you can see people's faces and you can't, right? So anybody willing to share that has permission to share, or even share an insight you had that wouldn't be disclosing anything of your partners?
Well, Mean and I kind of got off track. So we have a personal connection now, but we were really just connecting overall. I don't think we answered the question that we were supposed to do, Andrea.
Well, you probably experienced it, but to put it into language might be a little different, right? So the idea is, how do you make a connection with someone else?
Right.
Oh, Paula Cross, your last name had me thrown off. Now I see your face. Now I know who you are. Okay, I know everybody here. So how do you, like, anybody come up with an aha?
Well, can I interrupt? No, I don't think anyone on the call is surprised that you know everyone. You, Andrea.
Nice.
You're a connector.
Yeah. So any like a mini aha that maybe came from it, or awareness about yourself, like how you make connections?
Well, you know, Sammy and I were talking, and her camera's broken, which is why her face isn't with us. And you know, one of the first things we talked about is that we do look at one another's faces to see whether what we're saying is being received or not. And so we learned a great lesson, just because Sammy's camera is broken, about really how important facial expressions are. And then I was saying to Sammy that one of the things that I always try to do is I try to locate the beauty in someone. So my job is just to find the beauty in the person. And by doing that, there's a connection that occurs.
It probably points your listening also, Nancy.
Yes.
Yep. Points your listening towards that person. That's beautiful. That's awesome. Yep. Cool. Well, again, now, I mean, just again, thinking of that awareness of being able to see somebody's faces and when you can't. So the thought would be is, if you can't see somebody's faces, what adjustments are you making to create connections? Because it can still be done. It's just different, right, than when you're face to face.
To share this with Sammy, but I realized that I was really leaning into the computer. Like somehow if I got my body aligned, it would create better connection because I couldn't see her face. And I thought, I had that thought inside of my head, and I went, oh, well, that's really interesting.
Yeah. So just like even observing ourselves, right? That's what part of today is about. It's just like to be able to observe ourselves and see where this empathy shows up and how it shows up, and when it shows up differently than maybe what you want it to show up, and can you create more consistencies with it? So my next question, we're going to do it again. I'm going to put you with a different partner. Again, we're going to create some more new connections right here, and share an example of a time you showed empathy to someone else, and what did you say? Do you have a go-to phrase that maybe you hear yourself say often, or, you know, there's an action, right, that you do to show empathy? Is there something that you see as a pattern within yourself that you've already created for yourself that shows empathy? And if not, you get the opportunity to go in, I want to start doing something. I want to show empathy more by doing something. Of course, we've given you some tips already of what that might look like, but of course, figure out what's going to fit you at the same time. So you're just going to share an example of when you were empathetic and maybe what you said. And if you don't have access to that, maybe what you would want to do differently. So let me get the breakout rooms going again. Recreate. So you're going to have some hopefully new connections. It sure looks that way. We got you in for 4 minutes. Enjoy the conversation.
SGM folks occasionally.
Right on.
Welcome back. Yep. So, okay, I would love if anybody, once again, would be willing to share an insight that they had or some kind of new awareness around how do you demonstrate kind of that as, like, how does empathy show up? What do you do? What do you say? Anybody create an awareness around that? No?
Well, I'm happy to share again, but I don't want to be the big mouth in the group.
You're not, Nancy. Go for
Thank
it.
you. I was sharing that I had two very distinct, different times to be empathetic over the weekend. One, a friend went through something pretty serious and kind of embarrassing. And another, a death of a dear friend's father. And I was sharing how very different empathy looked in each situation. One was simply being present and not saying anything. And for me, not asking any questions, because that's my natural thing. What happened kind of thing. And the other was, you know, saying, I'm so sorry, and the hug, do you know what I mean? Just holding on for dear life. And so, you know, Michelle and I came to the conclusion that empathy is a moving target. It depends on really what's occurring. It's not one size fits all.
No, right? Empathy is complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. And it's, in a lot of cases, it can be uncomfortable, right? And the uncomfortable can come from either fear or that I have to make myself vulnerable.
Right.
Right. And then we want to protect ourselves, right? Like, oh, they're going to see, you know, I'm not going to know what to say, and that's trusting yourself also.
Right.
Trusting yourself that you have access to supporting others. It's innate in our nature. We're social beings.
Sorry, everyone. I accidentally have my phone here.
So it's like we need to trust, right? We have to trust our ability, because again, we were born to connect with others, and we just have to do, right? We just do it. I don't know why we hold ourselves back. We play small when we can play big. I know Nancy says that quite often. You know,
I do.
I've got to play big. So I have one more question for you all. And this one, again, creating connections, even in, like, think of in work environments, creating teams, feeling supported, having access to go have somebody to talk to, right? Resources available for you, knowing you have to walk away from a conversation and come back because it's just not a good time. Like, we're, you know, like, I'm fatigued. I'm empathetically fatigued. Like, not one more person I have to kind of like hold, right? Because I've been doing it all day. And sometimes that's where leadership comes into play. It's like, I can do one more, because I know I can, right? Like, just building that confidence in yourself too. Sometimes it's knowing your limits. Like, one more is one too many, right? And we have that's that self-awareness of knowing about ourselves. So the last question, how do you know you have a mutually satisfying relationship? How do you know? How do you know you're connected to somebody else? How do you know it's mutually satisfying for both people involved or for a team? How do you know you have a mutually satisfying relationship? A lot of times when I do that question in coaching one-on-one, people are like, oh, I have no idea. Like, how often do you think about it? How often do you sit down and actually analyze a relationship to say, how am I doing with my connection with them? What's my level of trust with them? You know, when we speak to each other, are we 50-50-ish? You know, does one person dominate more of the talking? One person does more of the listening? Does that work? Do you have any resentment around that? You know, those sort of things are great access to you to kind of question how you know if you have a mutually satisfying relationship, and if you need to make a request of the other person or the team, or something's working or not working. So we're going to do this. Again, last question, how do you know you have a mutually satisfying relationship? Let me get those breakout rooms going, and then we'll just do a quick summary Q&A and send you on your way. Alex, thanks for joining us. See that
Thank
you
you
got
guys. Have a good one. Sorry, I have to jump.
That's okay.
Bye.
Take
Good
care.
to have you.
Yeah. Okay. So let me recreate all the rooms. Now we have 2. We only had one room, one group of 3. So we're going to go ahead and change partners. And here you go.
It was nice talking with you.
Personal. Oh.
Hey there.
Perfect. Hello. Guys, you got
Question, yeah.
good. Okay. Well, any insights to how do you, anybody want to share, maybe that hasn't shared, how do you know you have a mutually satisfying relationship? Any nuggets come out of that? Paula, Meg, Natalia, Mina, anyone?
Okay.
Sammy, willing to share?
Well, Natalia and I talked about how when both parties give it time and give
Mm-hmm.
time to that relationship, how that shows that value and that it's working, that there is that connection. And then we got into kind of a discussion about, you know, it's harder now with so many people working remote in the workplace, how we get that connection.
Yep. Yep.
And so many virtual meetings, you don't always catch that there's a problem with the connection. It takes a lot of work to figure that out.
Yep. It definitely, that's great. It does take a lot more energy. I'm finding that to maintain connections, right? I have to make more of an effort. And I think that goes for everybody, even on the other side, because like, let's say with the convenience of Zoom, if you want to call it that, right? You can jump from one meeting to the other and you don't have to drive in between places, right? And all this other stuff that it's almost like it's over capacity some days, right? And then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, now I have to go home and talk to my family or friends or try to be more social. And some days are harder than others, right? So again, it's like conjuring up that, like creating yourself to be, you know, taking a deep breath and being available for somebody, you know. So great points. And again, just notice those things within yourself. And of course we need to give ourselves breaks along the way as well. So I have in the chat, I just wanted to make a comment that I did put the link in there for the McKinsey article that I have been referencing that talks about leadership in crisis. Great read. You can even section it off. It's kind of a long one, but you can pick apart and click different links of what specifically you would like to read in that article. And then also uploaded into the chat the slide deck, so you can have access to some of these just quick hits of information that'll be available for you right there. So in summary, let's kind of like, how do you summarize what you're learning about empathy? And from my perspective, what I wanted to throw out there is to like start by creating space, Paula, in connection, right? Space to attain a keener awareness of what is going on within you and around you, right? Like take moments within your day to stop and pause. I can get going, right? You get going in your day and you start plummeting into your meetings and emails and whatever else. And what I'm starting to do too is like every 50 minutes, I schedule a 10-minute break, because a lot of it is this digital world that I'm in. My brain functions differently. I find it fatigues quicker. So I make sure, get up, walk the dog, go take a breath, even just go stand outside with my feet in the grass, connect right to the earth. Little things like that just step me away from the virtual reality to like being in a different environment. Be bold in exhibiting vulnerability, right? It takes courage to be vulnerable. So we got to lower our guard in confronting what is in front of us or what's unfolding. Just step into it. Trust yourself. And then we can demonstrate empathy to better tap the emotions others are feeling and act with compassion to make individuals and groups feel genuinely cared for. Because if we know we are cared for, we're supported, we feel safe, I guarantee you're going to open up more. You're going to be more available. You're going to be more effective as a human being. So cultivating these qualities is just a great way to look inward, to start to understand those emotions and fears that show up in each and every one of us, different times of the day. I think as we answered the question, sometimes maybe, right? Certain circumstances show up. in that I think that skill of empathy will definitely help us recover. It'll help us cope. It'll help us be resilient, right, in this world that we're working through. So I just wanted to throw up the last slide so you have my contact information. I always do a follow-up email, give you some additional links for additional resources that are available. And just wanted to open it up for any questions that anybody has. We have a couple more minutes available. Any questions around empathy? Comments?
Andrea, where will the slide deck be located?
It's in the chat. If you go to the
Oh.
chat, you can see it there and you can download it right from the chat. I have a PDF there, and as well as the link is there to that McKinsey article.
It's not coming through as a PDF for me.
It's not? Okay. I'll follow up in an email and resend it.
Okay, thank you.
It could just be my computer, babe. I've tried to save it into my computer and I wasn't able to.
Okay, no worries. Happy to do it in a different form.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much, Andrea.
Yep. Hey, it's been my pleasure. One thing about Roaring Fork Leadership, I'm excited. Nancy has done these talks for us. Michelle is going to be up and coming on August 11th, doing a talk for us. And I think we're booked through, I think, the beginning of October with speakers. Woo! And more are coming on. So every Tuesday, noon to 1, join us. I think these are just quick hit refreshers of ideas to remind us of how to show up in this pandemic era that we're all getting to experience together. And these skills,
yeah, I did it so much fun.
And they're fun. Hopefully we're creating new connections,
new skills,
creating community. And again, it's not, these skills won't only help you today, they're going to help you even beyond this experience of a pandemic that we're all doing. And RFL is a resource, a leadership resource here in the Valley. We have programming. We're currently accepting applications for our 10-month academy program, and know that I think we've got Meg Plum, who's an alumni here, and Kelly and Natalia at SGM. I've come into their organization and worked with them and building culture and connection and communication, and just trying to create a community of leaders so that we can recover more quickly and thrive in today's world. So once again, thank you all so much for joining me for this hour and working on developing and becoming more aware of your empathy. So you all enjoy the rest of your day, take on those challenges of making a difference in the world, applying empathy, and just being an amazing human being. So thank you again for joining. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone.
My pleasure. Thank you. Bye-bye.